Several attacks have been raised recently against early marriage in Islam, which clearly result from ignoring facts about pre-modern society and Islam or intentionally concealing them. One such claim is that Islam's age of consent was relatively low in history. First of all, early procreation was a necessity for human survival. Lifespan ranged from 20 to 30 years due to high death rates. Even until the 18th century, 8 children were still needed by each fertile wife just to maintain the population. Also, sexual attraction accompanies puberty, which genetically ranges from ages 7 to 13 in women. So whether one believes this instinct resulted from evolution or part of God's plan, procreation after puberty in history is natural and acceptable. According to the Journal of Psychology and Human Sexuality, the age of consent throughout history usually coincided with the age of puberty, with the absolute minimum at 7. Both that journal and Encyclopedia Britannica state that the age of consent laws were passed from Roman law to the Church to English common law, which states, between 7 years in puberty there could be consent but not consummation until puberty, with no parental consent required from the age of 12. This was confirmed in 1877 by the U.S. Supreme Court. Even today, 6 states and the District of Columbia allow this common law marriage, and such marriages are then constitutionally recognized in all 50 states. Marriage as early as 7, which was considered the age of reason, or directly after puberty, was the norm for the vast majority of all human society even until the 19th century. 1300 years earlier, Islam's minimum of 9 was 2 years higher and also added the protection of requiring parental consent even after age 12. As a result, not only was Islam's age of consent higher than all pre-modern law, it also added the protection of requiring parental consent after age 12. The second claim is that Islam allowed marriage at puberty in pre-modern times, which caused psychological harm because puberty was too young to give informed consent. The fact is that even until the 18th century, reaching puberty meant becoming an adult in terms of maturity, behavior, and responsibility. As stated in the Journal of Social History, Online Etymology Dictionary, Journal of Marriage and the Family, and numerous academic references. Children face the daily struggle for physical and economic survival, and while this type of environmental stress actually causes puberty at a younger age, it's proven to have also speeded psychological maturity. This maturity helped in coping with the responsibilities of early marriage and childbearing. These responsibilities were indeed valued by society, including the most important founding father of the United States, Benjamin Franklin. It was only in the industrial mid-18th century that psychological maturity started to delay, due to side effects that are proven to delay maturity, such as increasing comforts of life, diminished parental guidance, and that children remain children longer to complete their education. It's therefore ridiculous to demand late marriage in pre-modern society on the pretense of psychological harm, as it would have wiped out the human race for reasons that only arise for immature adolescents today. Since psychological maturity and adulthood were reached at puberty in pre-modern times, it's also naive to slander early marriage in history as child sexual abuse, the engagement of a child in sexual activities which the child is unprepared for developmentally and can't give informed consent, or pedophilia, the sexual attraction towards prepubescent children. As a result, early procreation was psychologically appropriate and even a valued benefit to society. The third claim is that Islam allowed procreation at puberty in pre-modern times, which was more dangerous to the younger mothers. This attack cites a UNFPA study, but conceals that the study was for 2 contemporary impoverished nations, and that almost all of these deaths are preventable simply by providing access and transportation to hospitals. The International Journal of Epidemiology states, studies implicate poverty, not maternal age, as the real threat to maternal and infant welfare. In pre-modern times, the high risk of childbirth, due to lack of medical knowledge and hygiene, affected all women regardless of age. In fact, early procreation was a genetically superior trait for population growth in pre-modern times, for two reasons. First, women who have puberty earlier have children who grow up faster and weigh more. Second, life history theory states that in a less stable environment, natural selection will favor individuals that reproduce earlier within a population. As a result, early procreation was not harmful, but beneficial to newborns and genetics. The fourth claim is that Islam allows marriage at puberty in modern times, which causes sexual and psychological harm. First of all, it's untrue that Islamic age of consent is lower in modern times compared to other laws. For example, the US and other countries currently allow marriage well under the age of 16 with pregnancy or parental or court approval. 17 Islamic countries have age of consent ranging from 15 to 18 years with parental consent, which was raised specifically as an implementation of Islamic law. In fact, because of the contemporary delay in maturity, marriage at puberty today would violate 6 basic Islamic rules. First, rushd, psychological maturity or prudent judgment, is required before marriage. Second, no one should harm anyone else. Third, people's best interest must be observed. Fourth, no one should bear any burden beyond their capacity. Fifth, governments and guardians are entrusted to act correctly. Sixth, compliance to urf, new social norms that are considered good. Secondly, it's untrue that Islamic marital law results in more harm in modern times compared to other laws. In fact, the Islamic requirement of marriage provides to every sexual relationship and its potential offspring the benefits of faithfulness, emotional support, mutual trust, commitment, parental guidance, and wide social support. In addition, with a slightly lower average age of marriage, Islamic countries benefit from the early marriage mentality, which is proven to result in psychological maturity at a relatively younger age. On the other hand, non-Islamic societies permit and condone sexual activities years before psychological maturity and the legal age of marriage, which causes devastating sexual harm to adolescents, such as the following current US statistics. 50% of child sexual abuse offenders are adolescents themselves, committing sexual abuse, child pornography, child prostitution, and incest, using deception, force, or coercion.
Now I'm alone, filled with so much shame for all the years I caused you pain. If only I could sleep in your arms again. Mother, I'm lost without you. You were the sun that brightened my day. Now who's gonna wipe my tears away? If only I knew what I know today. Mother, I'm lost without you.
Countries that choose legalized prostitution as their solution, like Germany, the Netherlands, Sweden, and Denmark, end up with increased rates of child prostitution and sex trafficking, child pornography, incest, and even legal bestiality, sex with animals. In modern times, the age of puberty has fallen below the age of psychological maturity, sexual values have greatly degraded, and the late marriage mentality is delaying psychological maturity even further. These three trends will continue to increase the above devastating sexual harm to adolescents in non-Islamic countries. While extremely rare cases of marriage at puberty in Afghanistan's countryside are exploited to attack all Muslims, it must be noted that even in Islamic countries that have not yet officially raised the minimum age of consent, they have done so in practice. Otherwise, Islam's critics would have publicized more than just a few cases from some isolated tent villages. More importantly, even such Islamic countries don't have any of the sexual atrocities that are documented at alarmingly high ratios in the same countries attacking Islam. As a result, Islam's flexible marital law provides far better protection than contemporary laws by prohibiting sexual activities prior to psychological maturity and then marriage. In conclusion, Islam responsibly channels sexual instincts through marriage, with the prior condition of psychological maturity. And contrary to claims of improved morality, non-Islamic laws have alarmingly driven child sexual abuse and psychological harm to epidemic proportions. Therefore, when such attacks against Islam are analyzed impartially, they reveal the perfect applicability of Islam's solution from the 7th century until today, and the utter failure of any other system to provide any protection whatsoever to society's youth. At best, these attacks are also found to be irresponsibly superficial due to the seriousness of this issue.
Several lies have been invented recently against Islam regarding Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha. These lies manipulate invented interpretations that contradict the legislation of all the 4 Islamic schools of thought or madhahib. The first lie claims that Prophet Muhammad forced Aisha's father to accept the marriage.
This lie distorts a summarized narration about Abu Bakr. The detailed hadith narrated by Aisha herself provides 4 facts that disprove the lie. First, Prophet Muhammad did not initiate the engagement. Khawla suggested the marriage because the companions feared for the Prophet's health after the death of Khadija. Second, the Prophet did not approach Abu Bakr directly. Rather, using the applicable etiquette, he replied to Khawla's suggestion, "So go and mention me to them." Third, Abu Bakr's question to Khawla, "Is she good for him? She is his brother's daughter," was not an objection, rather a question due to the pre-Islamic norm that assigned blood ties which don't actually exist, such as in adoption. The Prophet corrected this false notion to Khawla. Fourth, if Abu Bakr had any hesitation, he would simply have used the acceptable justification that she was already engaged, but instead he told Khawla to wait and went immediately to request permission from Aisha's previous fiancé. More importantly, even the consummation itself was urged by Abu Bakr, which disproves any reluctance from his side. Lady Aisha narrated, Abu Bakr told him, "What prevents you from consummating with your wife?" So he consummated our marriage. Furthermore, any doubt about Abu Bakr's compassion for his daughter's best interests is rejected, because he was very well known for his shafaqah, which is a term normally used to praise a compassionate father. As a result, not only did Abu Bakr consent, but both the engagement and the consummation were initiated and urged by people other than the Prophet.
The second lie claims that sexual acts were performed when Aisha was 6 years old.
The lie does not cite any hadith, but merely repeats a falsified fatwa against Saudi scholars who denied ever having made it as declared on their website. In Islam, approaching one's wife intimately, even without penetration, is only allowed if she has reached puberty, إذا بلغت, as stated by Hassan al-Basri, leader of the followers of the companions. The relevant hadith by Aisha proves that she had passed puberty because she said, "The Prophet used to tell us during our period to wear a skirt before physically approaching us." Therefore, the only sexual acts with prepubescent girls were actually just fantasized in the perverted imagination of the person fabricating the lie in his sick mind about thighing and rubbing repeatedly a 6-year-old girl.
The third lie claims that Lady Aisha had not reached puberty when her marriage was consummated.
The fallacy claims that the proof of Aisha's childhood is her saying that her dolls were with her when she was taken to his house as a bride, when she was 9. But Ibn Hajar cites in Fath al-Bari that the Muslim scholars deduced from the context of this hadith the permission to play with dolls regardless of age, as a means to learn about matters of the home and raising children. Indeed, Playing with dolls by adults is also common in many recent societies as educational preparation for motherhood. It's ridiculous to claim that merely playing with dolls or swings is evidence of physical or even mental maturity. The evidence for Aisha's adulthood is quite explicit. First, as shown in part 1 of this presentation, even until the 18th century, psychological maturity coincided with puberty, and all societies recognized puberty as the requirement to give informed consent for marriage. Second, in her parents' opinion, Aisha had reached puberty and was fit for marriage when Abu Bakr requested the consummation, just like the Jewish princess Sophia, who married when she became capable of marriage in her neighboring Jewish tribe. Third, Lady Aisha said, if the young girl reaches 9 years, then she is a woman. She's obviously describing herself and her acquaintances. Fourth, not merely did she reach menstruation, the great Malki scholar Dawoodi commented about her marriage, Aisha then had physically matured well indeed. As a result, not only had Lady Aisha reached puberty when her marriage was consummated, she was also a physically and psychologically mature adult.
The fourth lie dares to claim that Aisha did not consent to the marriage.
Not only did she consent to the marriage according to Islam's requirements, Lady Aisha was overjoyed and stated 6 privileges directly relating to her marriage. I have been given features not given to any woman. The Prophet married me when I was 7. The angel brought him my image in his hand to look at it. He consummated our marriage when I was 9. I saw the angel Gabriel. I was his most beloved wife. I attended his disease till he died, not witnessed but by me and the angels. It's clear from this hadith that Aisha not only consented, but was even ecstatic about this privilege.
The fifth lie claims that Islam permits consummation to prepubescent girls.
To disfigure the truth, the fallacy omits the very first verse revealed regarding the waiting period after divorce in the correct context and order. The first verse sets the waiting period to 3 menstrual cycles. Since old and young women don't menstruate, the second verse was subsequently revealed, setting their waiting period to 3 months, as explained by Ibn Kathir. And finally, the third verse sets the exception for any marriage that hasn't been consummated. This exception applies to marriages that can't be consummated, such as not only prepubescent girls, but even women who have menstruated but are not yet ready physically or emotionally for intercourse. In fact, the only verse in the Quran using the term bulugh al-nikah, or age of procreation, to describe puberty mentions the additional requirement of mental maturity for orphans to receive their financial assets. This Islamic requirement of maturity, which is even correctly relayed in Encyclopedia Britannica, undeniably applies even more to marriage contracts because it entails responsibility towards other people. Furthermore, Imam Abu Hanifa legislated that since a woman who reached puberty has authority over her own financial affairs, then she has authority over her own marriage. Consummation before puberty cannot occur because it would violate this right of women to consent. Indeed, an authentic hadith shows that a young girl who was still a virgin came to the Prophet, and she mentioned that her father married her to someone while she was forced. So the Prophet gave her the choice to remain married or not. As a result, prior to consummating a marriage, Islam not only requires puberty, but physical and mental maturity followed by consent as well.
The sixth ridiculous claim is that Muhammad invented Islam to satisfy his sexual desires.
First of all, there were already Talmud and church laws permitting vast sexual aberrations. But while affirming the divine source of Judaism and Christianity, Islam rejected these obviously false interpretations or alterations. Please read the following examples. Secondly, Islam actually opposed the extreme sexual permissiveness of that time, such as Therefore, to satisfy abnormal sexual desires in 7th century Arabia, no new religion was needed. All one had to do was take his pick from the existing religions and norms. In contrast, Islam protected people from these shameful laws.
In conclusion, these attacks against Islam necessitated disfiguration, concealing the truth, and incompetent, twisted interpretations. They also put into serious question the morality, system of values, and beliefs of anyone perpetrating such lies.